You're listening to the AI Moment with me, Jonathan Wagstaffe.
And me, Danny Denhardt.
And Dan, what are we going to talk about today?
Today, we're going to dive into why so many companies sort of falter a little bit and fall down when they started using AI, and they do the start-stop motion and it starts hindering their progress. So they kind of go in for a pit stop and then they don't come out, and it really does hinder them. A few examples I'll dive into just quickly, and then I'll see how you find it, Jonathan. But there's a lot of, once you stop, there's a lot of distrust around AI. And even if you go through a manifesto and create your policy, a lot of people try and over perfect it. And what that means is people are really struggling to understand or find their rhythm around what tools they should use, which LLMs they should use, and how they can connect it all together safely. And what I've seen that do is create this real disconnect. Some people go up and use it and carry on using it. Other people just stop. And anyone who's looking for a reason to stop will stop. Anyone looking to accelerate their own usage to keep performing at a level that they maybe not have had the chance to before will go off and do that. And what I've found in speaking to a few different businesses is some people go off and create their own toolkit and their own AI stack, and then others will stop. So you get this real performance gap between the teams. And then there's like a bit of a disconnect, and it causes some friction between the team members. They're like a couple of anecdotal messages that I've had and conversations I've had. How have you found it, or how do you see this being an issue, Jonathan?
Yeah, I think it comes down from, I've seen similar to you, and I think it comes mainly from people not thinking this stuff through before they start to experiment. So I think I've seen situations where, there's a kickoff process that might be a workshop. People get excited. They understand what there may be the potential to do, and they want to go and start to experiment. But there's a little stage beforehand where it's like, okay, how are we going to think about this? How are we going to do this stuff? And that thinking process should set up the thing that says, okay, here's the guidelines, here's the rules, here's the playbooks for how we're going to go and start to experiment and implement. And I think sometimes that thinking process is missing, and it's difficult. I'm not criticizing it because it's difficult. This is all new stuff, so it's difficult to get your head around. But what you end up with is people start to experiment, and then a few weeks later, legal turn up and say, we've just now finalized the policy and the guidelines. There may be a manifesto as well, as you say, but no, you can't do all the things you've just started to do. And so at that point, you get this stop. And so everyone started with the momentum, now they stop. Maybe they restart, maybe they don't, maybe they think it's too difficult. There's a whole set of stuff goes on there. Maybe you start to get shadow AI. So people say, okay, I'm quite excited with this, so I'm going to go off and do it at home now. You start to get these different things happening, but it's a function for me of, it's one of those things, the old carpenter's thing about measure twice and cut once. It's kind of just take that time to do that bit of thinking and try and predict where the problems might be before we start. And then the execution works much better.
I've seen so many people try and hit 90 to 100% perfect. And actually the people who race ahead of them are the ones that get to 70%. They carry on a little bit more slowly, but they keep their momentum going. And a bit like the sprinters, if you have a full start once or twice, often it will put off the greatest of athletes, even the ones with real mental strength, because all it's done is kicked them out of their rhythm or their flow, especially if it's around banning tools or not being considered around how things are updated and new tools come out. So when we talked around Gemini recently, that had a huge update and had a load of different use cases, which other tools don't have. And I've seen some teams debating whether they have to stop ChatGPT and jump across to Google, which I think is hindering more than it's actually helping. I've definitely seen that. Who do you think responsibility is to own this? We've obviously talked around before not being an IT ownership, but do you think it's something that leaders should own, or do you think something like a captains and champions of AI should own it and help navigate these sort of challenges or changes that happen?
Well, I think it's a leadership thing. And I think that the fix, I'm a great believer in 90-day sprints. And I think the 90-day sprint is the perfect fix here. So, at any given point, we've done our thinking. We know how we're going to do it. We're now going to do a 90-day sprint. So we're going to try and do the following things in 90 days. Here are the KPIs, what we're trying to achieve. Here's the scope of what we're trying to do. run that 90 days. Then let's stop and evaluate at the 90-day point. And then, as you say, okay, do we need to change models here? Do we need to revisit how we did it? But you're doing it in 90-day sprints, which means you've got a structured way of doing things. And it kind of stops that sudden, okay, everyone stop what they're doing. The challenge with that is that sometimes what that does is it moves you back. So when you restart, you don't restart where you left off, you restart some way back up the track. So I think one of the things I would suggest is that it's a leadership thing. Now, whether that's, in a growing business, that's probably the business leadership. In an enterprise, that's probably departmental leadership. Obviously, your captains and your champions are going to help carry that stuff through. But I think setting a cadence that says we're going to do 90-day sprints with a very clear scope and goals for that 90 days is one of the ways you can address this stuff.
Yeah, I would agree. And also I'd say if you've got your captains and champions who are in it all the time and want to help improve usage and problem solve, they're going to be the ones that understand what's going on and help guide the company from doing that start or false starts or trying to hand the baton over and dropping it in a relay race. So that's something that I'm saying a lot and trying to help people with. So if we were to wrap up, what would the couple of big takeaways be for everyone, Jonathan?
You've got to harness everyone's enthusiasm, but the important bit is that bit of thinking before we start. So once we know we're going to do this stuff, some thinking around, is everybody ready? Is everybody trained? What are we going to allow them to do? What are we not going to allow them to do? What are we expecting to achieve? And then 90-day sprints to go and achieve that with a review at the end of the sprint and then set goals for the next 90 days. That would be my one paragraph of advice for people, Dan. How about you?
Yeah, I'd agree. And also I'd just add in, make sure that you've got leaders and they're clearly defined who they are and they have three themes that they don't move around. And so they continue to push the agenda and help the rest of the team mature as opposed to maneuver or stop momentum in the way that AI is improving your business or is, influencing the business in the way forward. So yeah, I think there's some great takeaways there, Jonathan.
I agree. Good to see you, my friend.
We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today, everyone. If you liked what you heard, please give us a rating and review in any of the podcast players. We have a supporting newsletter, which is aimoment.co.uk, that comes out on Mondays and Fridays with every pod, and we dive a little bit deeper. So please subscribe there. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.